You'll never discover yourself until you stop trying to please everyone. You learned early that love had conditions, that silence meant safety, that being good was the same as being worthy. You built a version of yourself that fit neatly into other people's comfort, agreeable, predictable, always available. You called it kindness, maturity, or patience, but beneath all that harmony lived a quiet ache, the feeling of never being fully seen, never being fully you. Every nod, every fake smile, every time you swallowed your truth just to keep the peace. It taught your nervous system that acceptance was survival. You learned to read people's emotions like weather forecasts, adjusting yourself to avoid storms. But over time, the cost grew heavier. You started to realize that the peace you were protecting wasn't peace at all. It was silence. And silence can become a prison. There comes a moment, though, when pretending starts to hurt more than rejection ever could. A moment when you catch your reflection and feel like you're looking at a stranger. The life you've built looks stable on the surface, but inside, there's a fracture. A voice that whispers, "This isn't me." That whisper is your truth trying to breathe again. You can't discover who you are while living for their comfort. Because every time you shrink yourself to fit someone else's expectations, you confirm the belief that your real self is not enough. The truth is, you'll never find freedom by chasing approval, only exhaustion. And the moment you stop trying to be liked is the moment you start to be known. The hidden cost of approval, how it erodes your identity. At first, it feels harmless, saying yes to avoid conflict, agreeing just to be polite, doing favors so no one feels disappointed. But over time, this constant need to please becomes an invisible contract. I'll keep everyone comfortable if it means I won't be abandoned. And that's how the slow erosion begins. Every yes that goes against your truth is a quiet betrayal of your soul. You start to forget what you actually want, what you actually believe, what you actually feel. You lose the map to yourself. The more you adjust your tone, your opinions, your boundaries to match others' expectations, the more your reflection blurs. It's like staring into a mirror that never reflects your face, only the versions others want to see. Soon, you start performing instead of living. Every conversation becomes a calculation. Every relationship turns into a balance between authenticity and acceptance. You stop asking, "Is this right for me?" and instead ask, "Will this make them like me?" That shift is subtle but devastating because it reprograms your identity around fear instead of truth. The approval you chase doesn't fill you, it drains you. It keeps you addicted to external validation like a drug that only numbs you temporarily. And the worst part? The more you please, the less they respect you. People sense when you abandon yourself. They may appreciate your compliance, but they don't admire your silence. One day you realize you've become emotionally weightless, defined entirely by how others perceive you. You laugh when you're supposed to, apologize when you haven't done wrong, and smile when your soul wants to scream. You think you're keeping the peace, but you're just keeping yourself small. You don't notice the damage immediately, because people still praise you for being so kind or so easygoing. But underneath, your inner world grows hollow. The price of being liked is too high when it costs your sense of self, and it's not your fault. It's how you were trained to survive. The psychology of pleasing, why you do it without knowing. You didn't choose to become a people pleaser, you were conditioned into it. It started long before you could put it into words. Maybe love was inconsistent. Maybe approval came only when you performed well, stayed quiet, or met someone else's expectations. You learned early that being yourself came with consequences, and that pleasing others was safer than being rejected. The human brain is wired for belonging. From childhood, rejection feels like danger because once it actually was. Our ancestors survived through acceptance, Being part of the tribe meant protection. So when someone disapproves of you, your nervous system reacts as if your survival is at stake. That's why a simple frown or a harsh tone can trigger anxiety, guilt, or the urge to fix things immediately. It's not weakness. It's biology repeating an old pattern. But psychology adds another layer. The dopamine rush you get from being praised reinforces the behavior. Every compliment becomes a microdose of safety. Over time, you start to crave that feeling more than peace itself. And when you don't get it, you feel restless, unworthy, even invisible. That's why saying no feels wrong. Your body associates it with danger, not strength. This pattern often begins as a survival strategy in families where emotional approval was inconsistent or conditional. Maybe you became the mediator, the helper, the one who kept the peace. You learned that your role was to soothe others to stay safe. And though you've grown up, the emotional contract remains. If they're okay, then I'm okay. But here's the hidden trap. When you live this way, you never build an internal sense of worth. Your self-esteem depends on feedback loops you can't control. You're constantly scanning the room for signs of approval like a radar that never shuts off. You become hyper-attuned to tone, expression, and mood, but disconnected from your own needs. This is why the path to self-discovery feels so confusing. Because you've spent years responding to everyone else's emotions, your own desires feel blurry. You've mistaken peacekeeping for purpose and kindness for self-betrayal. But people-pleasing isn't kindness. It's self-erasure disguised as virtue. The turning point. When you realize you're invisible in your own life. It begins quietly. You wake up one day and something feels off. You're surrounded by people yet feel unseen. You listen, you help, you show up. But no one really asks how you are. They assume you're fine because you always are. You've built a reputation for being dependable, calm, composed. But behind that steady smile, there's a growing emptiness, a subtle awareness that you've disappeared inside your own story. You notice it when you agree to plans you don't enjoy, when you nod through conversations that don't interest you, when your laughter feels rehearsed. The more you accommodate, the less you exist. You've become fluent in everyone else's emotions but mute in your own. It's not that people don't care, it's that you've trained them not to notice. You taught them that your comfort was optional, that your silence meant contentment, that your boundaries were flexible. This is the moment self-awareness hits like a wave. You realize that your life looks complete on the outside, but hollow on the inside. You've built stability on self-abandonment, a fragile piece that depends on staying invisible. You wanted love, but you settled for being needed. You wanted connection, but you settled for being useful. And in that realization comes both grief and freedom. Grief because you see how long you've lived pretending. Freedom because now you can stop. When you stop chasing approval, you begin to see who you are beneath all the performance. It's disorienting at first, like waking from a long sleep. You start to hear thoughts that were buried, feelings that were silenced, dreams that were postponed. They return quietly, like old friends waiting for you to remember their names. And then it hits you. The version of you that everyone likes isn't even you. It's a mask you wore so long it started to look like your skin. But the moment you admit that truth, that you've been living as a shadow of yourself, everything changes. You no longer crave to be seen by everyone. You crave to see yourself again. The rebellion within, learning to disappoint people gracefully. There comes a point when exhaustion turns into awakening. You realize that your endless effort to keep everyone happy has left you empty. You start to see how much energy goes into maintaining an image of peace that was never real. And beneath the fear of being disliked, there's something stronger, a quiet hunger for freedom. That's where the rebellion begins. This rebellion isn't loud. It doesn't scream or destroy, it's internal, a shift from needing approval to honoring truth. It starts with a simple, terrifying act, saying no. The first no feels like betrayal, but it's not. It's self-respect taking its first breath. Each time you protect your boundaries, you reclaim a piece of yourself that you'd buried under years of guilt and compliance. People might not like this new version of you. Some will call you distant, selfish, or cold. That's because your silence once served their comfort. Your compliance once kept their world steady. But you are not responsible for protecting other people's illusions. Disappointing someone doesn't make you wrong. It means you've stopped abandoning yourself to keep the peace. You'll notice that saying no doesn't end the world. The discomfort fades, and what remains is clarity. The realization that peace built on dishonesty isn't peace at all. You'll begin to prefer solitude over fake harmony, truth over validation. You'll start to breathe deeper, walk taller, and feel something you haven't in a long time: integrity. And here's the paradox. The more authentic you become, the fewer people you please, but the more respect you earn. Not because you demanded it, but because authenticity carries a quiet gravity. It attracts those who value truth and repels those who depended on your submission. The rebellion within is not about anger. It's about alignment. You're no longer choosing between kindness and honesty. You're learning they can coexist. You can care about people and still disappoint them. You can love deeply and still refuse to betray yourself, because being real will always offend someone still living in illusion. The rebuilding phase, redefining your self-respect and boundaries. After the rebellion, silence returns, but this time it feels different. It's not the silence of suppression, it's the silence of healing. You start to rebuild piece by piece a life that feels like your own. The noise of constant approval fades, and in its absence, you begin to hear yourself again. Your wants, your limits, your truth. This rebuilding phase isn't about cutting everyone off or living in defiance. It's about learning to exist without performance. You begin to realize that boundaries are not walls. They're doors that open only to what aligns with your values. You no longer say yes out of guilt or no out of fear. You say what you mean. You act from self-respect, not anxiety. It takes time to trust this new rhythm. At first it feels lonely, because you've confused people-pleasing with connection. You miss the constant feedback, the reassurance, the feeling of being needed. But what you're actually missing is the version of yourself that depended on validation to feel real. And letting that version die is not a loss, it's liberation. You learn to embrace solitude as a mirror, not a punishment. The quiet moments that once scared you now become sacred. You start to notice how peace feels in your body, calm, grounded, and honest. You begin to build relationships that don't require self-betrayal to survive. People who value your no as much as your yes. People who don't flinch when you draw a line. In this phase, discipline becomes your ally. You learn that consistency with your truth matters more than momentary comfort. You stop negotiating your worth with the world and start honoring it privately. You no longer chase love by sacrificing yourself. You attract it by being whole. It's not an overnight transformation. It's a quiet reconstruction of identity. You're replacing compliance with integrity, chaos with clarity, guilt with grounded self-respect. You're no longer seeking permission to exist. You're simply existing, and that is enough. You'll walk alone for a while. It will feel empty at first, but that silence is not loneliness, it's detox. You're cleansing yourself from years of pretending, and in that stillness, you start to hear a voice you haven't heard in years, your own. The silent power of authenticity, freedom without apology. There's a moment, after all the noise fades, when you realize you no longer owe anyone an explanation for who you are. You stop rehearsing your words to sound softer. Stop bending your truth to make others comfortable. You begin to speak, not to be understood, but to be honest. That's when authenticity stops being an act of rebellion and becomes your natural state. Authenticity isn't loud. It doesn't seek attention. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's quiet, steady, unshakable. It's walking into a room and no longer adjusting your energy to fit it. It's letting silence speak when words would only dilute your truth. It's knowing that being misunderstood doesn't threaten your worth anymore. When you live authentically, you start losing interest in convincing people. You no longer chase validation because you've replaced it with inner peace. Approval becomes irrelevant. The noise of judgment loses its power. You understand that everyone sees you through the filter of their own fears and expectations, and that their perception is not your responsibility. Freedom begins when you no longer trade your integrity for belonging. You stop performing kindness and start embodying it. You stop proving your value and start living it. The world around you may not change, but your relationship with it does. You begin to move differently, with purpose instead of pressure, with clarity instead of confusion. And here's the truth no one tells you. Authenticity costs relationships, but it gives you your soul back. You'll lose people who preferred your silence, but you'll gain the peace that comes with being whole. That exchange is worth everything. Because once you know the strength of standing in your truth, you'll never again kneel to be accepted. You become grounded, centered, calm in a way that doesn't depend on external stability. You stop reacting and start responding. You understand that power isn't in controlling others' opinions. It's in mastering your own mind. And when your peace is no longer negotiable, your presence becomes magnetic. That's what real confidence is. Not arrogance, not dominance, but quiet certainty. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything because it's built on truth. And the world doesn't change when you do this, but your relationship with it does. You were never meant to be liked. You were meant to be real. At some point, you stop chasing the illusion that everyone's approval will bring you peace. You realize that trying to be liked is an endless negotiation, one that always costs you your truth. You see how much energy you've spent shaping yourself into what others needed, instead of becoming who you were meant to be. And when that truth finally settles, there's a stillness that feels both heavy and liberating. You start to understand that life isn't about being agreeable, it's about being aligned. It's about living with a kind of honesty that makes you lose people, but never yourself. The moment you stop performing, your world grows quieter but truer. The conversations become fewer but deeper. The relationships shrink but they become rooted. The noise fades and in its place, clarity blooms. Being real doesn't mean being harsh. It means being whole. It means letting your yes mean yes and your no mean no, without guilt, without apology. It means standing in your truth even when your voice shakes. It's not about winning arguments or proving worth. It's about no longer abandoning yourself to make others comfortable. When you stop needing to be liked, you start attracting what's right for you. The people who meet you without pretense, the opportunities that fit who you actually are, the peace that can't be taken away because it's no longer borrowed from others' approval. You were never meant to be everyone's favorite. You were meant to be yourself, honest, imperfect, evolving. You were meant to walk paths where not everyone will follow, and that's okay. Because truth doesn't need a crowd. It just needs courage. So if you feel lost right now, maybe it's not because you've failed. Maybe it's because you've outgrown the version of you that needed to please everyone. And the person you're becoming, the one who no longer apologizes for existing, is waiting on the other side of that fear. You don't find yourself by being perfect in their eyes. You find yourself by standing alone in yours.